and welcome to Northern Institute's People Policy Place Seminar 2026. Thanks for joining us today, to everyone in the room and people online. Northern Institute would like to acknowledge that the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, for us here in Darwin, are the Larrakia, and we pay our respects to Larrakia elders past, present and progressing, and further extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. We're going to begin shortly. Just to let you know, if you'd like to ask a question, there'll be a Q&A at the end of the talk. And if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A section. This is for the people online, in the Q&A section that you should find at the bottom of your screens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to Associate Professor Tracy Woodroffe and Dr Khushi Chauhan to do their introductions and to take it away.
Thank you, Katrina, and thank you to the NI staff for setting everything up for today. I'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining us, and thank you to Katrina for doing the acknowledgement of country. Today we're going to have a very, I hope you find it interesting conversation about what it's like to be a supervisor, an Indigenous supervisor with a non-Indigenous student studying an Indigenous topic. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of communication that needs to happen during that process. And, oh, there we are. Sorry, technical hitch. Like I said, there's a lot of communication that needs to happen during the PhD process already. And it's slightly complicated when culture becomes a significant aspect within those conversations, and cultural perspective and interpretation. So I'm just going to hand you over to Khushi now. She's going to have a little bit of a blurb and then we'll start with our presentation.
Thank you for that, Tracy. Thanks everyone for being here. Exactly what Tracy said. No. Yes, so it was really important being a non-Indigenous, and I will refer to myself as a non-white person as well, because I am non-Indigenous as well as do not belong to the white community. And it has been, when I started doing my PhD, it has been quite challenging for me to navigate that space. And I think Tracy came in as my light at the end of the tunnel. And we will talk about the strategies that we have used and also talk about more about the cross-cultural communication as we progress through.
You are.
So my name is Khushi and I have just recently completed my PhD. The topic for my PhD was Indigenous cross-curriculum priority. So I looked at the cross-curriculum priority in the Australian curriculum and how we embed that in the Northern Territory School. And Tracy was my principal supervisor throughout the PhD.
Okay, so what Khushi isn't necessarily saying about herself is that she's a teacher, okay? So Khushi has a teaching background, and that really was an important criteria for me agreeing to be Khushi's supervisor, because she is investigating or investigated a topic in education, specifically in the NT education department's treatment or notice of how teachers address the cross-curriculum priorities, okay? And the reason that the topic really rang true to me was that it is important for educators, especially in the Northern Territory where we have at least 40% of students as Indigenous, that educators are confident and able to embed Indigenous content within the way that they teach. And they are also able to understand how to adapt or adjust their teaching style, so their pedagogy, the strategies that they use to teach the learning material to cater specifically for the students that they have. So the specific students that they have don't all learn in the same way, and Indigenous students especially require or may require a particular type of engagement but especially deserve to see themselves reflected in what the teacher talks about in the classroom and in the learning, and that teachers are confident in their approach to working in Indigenous contexts and with Indigenous students. So Khushi, I hope, will agree in a minute. Thank you, Linda.
I will talk about the PhD itself in a minute.
What we're going to, I hope Khushi agrees with the point I'm going to make in a minute, and that is that Indigenous perspectives belong to Indigenous people. So if you're not an Indigenous person, you can't have an Indigenous perspective. You can try and understand an Indigenous perspective. You can try and be an ally with Indigenous people to help them get their perspective across, but you can't have one. Okay, Indigenous perspective is tied to Indigenous identity. And part of your identity as an Indigenous person includes lived experience. So unless you are an Indigenous person living your life and being treated your whole life like an Aboriginal person or Indigenous person in Australia, you can't understand an Aboriginal person in the way where you could assume their perspective. Okay, that's what makes Aboriginal academics so important. There are very few of us, and it is something that hasn't been able to be taken away from us through colonisation. Our importance is our understanding of what it feels like to be an Aboriginal person in Australia. I could go and talk for ages about identity and how lived experience fits with that, but that might have to be another time. The point I'm making is that Khushi really needed an Indigenous person to help with the way that she addressed or approached her research, and also to help interpret or understand from an Indigenous strength-based positioning. Anyone else who thinks that that's not relevant, come talk to me, because you are on the wrong track, okay? And luckily enough, I had enough spots or spaces, time to work with Khushi. Because there are so few of us, not every PhD student who is investigating an Indigenous topic gets to have an Indigenous supervisor. And if you flip that and think about it from an Indigenous supervisor's perspective, it's quite a heavy cultural load for there to be such a demand on your time. And I think it makes us quite unique and valued in the academic space. But I'll let Khushi fill you in a little bit more on that.
Totally agree. And we can see how lucky I am. Professor Linda Ford is also here, who was my associate supervisor. So I didn't just have Tracy, I also had Linda to support me through the journey. Okay, so let me just take you on a little journey of how this PhD started. Just really important to point out that Tracy and I's professional relationship just did not finish at the completion of my PhD. She has been a mentor since I finished my PhD as well. And you would realize, being an early academic, that mentorship is really, really essential. It can be quite a, tricky space to navigate. So while I was in my third year of PhD, Tracy, she took me on her one of her A6 fellowship project, which resulted in a Q1 journal article, a conversation article, and as well as a book. So for her early career researchers, that was quite good for me. And she's also involved me in her current projects, one of the ERC discovery projects, ILA grant, as well as some of the upcoming journal articles. So just, I guess, making a point here that early mentorship is really, really important for early career researchers, as it can be really hard to, know how to write a grant application or know how to manage people or funds. And I was able to see that firsthand while working with Tracy in those projects. So just to give you a little bit of context, Tracy has spoken about my PhD research. So I started to look at the gap between the curriculum as well as the actual pedagogy. So having been a teacher in the Northern Territory for 10 years, I kind of realized that there was a disconnect between the curriculum documents, the policy mandates, and the actual implementation of Indigenous perspectives in the classrooms. And naturally, when I was looking at that topic, it wasn't just something that I was, it wasn't like a superficial, oh, I'm just exploring the curriculum, but I was also looking deeply at the equity in education, so the issue of equity in education. So, any PhD, when it always starts with finding the right supervisor. So I remember that time when I picked up the phone call and I called CDU, Dr. Berit Zemitz, who was my associate supervisor then, but now has retired. She picked up the phone and I tried to explain my initial thoughts to her and my idea, what I wanted to explore. And she said, I actually know the right person for you. And she obviously recommended Tracy, and Tracy was the right person for this Indigenous research. Not only she has academic credentials, but she was also an educator. So she taught in the Northern Territory, primary schools, secondary schools. So every time we met not as just supervisor and student, we met as educators. So that was really important. Again, her Indigenous standpoint was a real vital anchor for my work as well, because sometimes I wouldn't see some of the perspectives, and she was there to help me see those perspectives. So she did provide that cultural safety and critical oversight, which was really, really crucial for this project. So quite big words, but I'll explain to you what it looked like. So the first and the most debilitating fear that I had even before I started my PhD, while I was in the classroom working with Indigenous students, even in a school setting, was the fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And Tracy really helped me overcome that fear. I still remember she, when I came up with these queries and I said, but I'm really scared. What if I say something that's not appropriate? What if I'm overstepping, the boundaries? And she said, well, if everybody was, going to be afraid, then no one's actually going to step up and talk about these issues. So that kind of gave me this confidence in myself. And I thought, well, as long as I consult with Tracy, I should be able to take on this journey. She also helped me bridge some of my blind spots. So naturally, as a non-Indigenous researcher, as a non-white person, there was some Indigenous perspectives that I was just not able to see. And that's where Tracy's critical insight, was really helpful. She was able to point out some of the nuances of the topic, looking at policy from different perspectives. So she was really able to highlight that for me. And like I said, we had that shared knowledge. So being educators, she had experience in teaching. I've been a teacher, so we knew what goes on in the classroom. That provided us with this real common language every time we sat together and discussed. We had mutual respect and strong professional relationships. So every time you look at a supervisor and a student, you think of the relationship as a hierarchy. But for us, I think it was more about partnership. I remember, I would think of Tracy as an expert in her field, but Tracy would always say to me, hey, Khushi, you are the expert of your own topic. And that was really good for my confidence. And also, what's the word for it? I was responsible for my own work. I took pride in what I did, and I felt quite confident in doing so. And another one was she really helped me manage the academic heat as well. So sometimes I would really come across as hot under the collar, and I would get really stomping my feet and get angry, when all of these things, these issues that came to surface as I, dug deep into the literature review and looked at equity and, the situation. And she would always have this calming knowledge to share with me and, help me look at the perspectives from different angles, from teachers, from, students' angles, from looking at this as a systemic struggle that we face in today's educational world, which kind of helped me calm down and, look at things very critically instead of just stomping my feet and being angry. So that was that. So if you look at a PhD timeline, it was a very typical PhD timeline, starting with an enrollment. Tracy really helped me with the Indigenous ethics part of it. So pointing out to, places where I can get support, fieldwork, analysis, and completion. And really effective communication was one of the reasons why we were able to complete my PhD within the time frame.
So I'm just going to jump in here, Khushi. And what I would like to highlight is Khushi's professionalism in what she was doing. So not everyone that you come across as a supervisor has the same drive or initiative, but Khushi had a great professional focus on what she was doing. She understood as a teacher why she thought that topic was important to address. I never had to speak with Khushi about approaching milestones or what happened next, because Khushi made sure that she tracked all of that herself. So she was very, very professional in the way that she approached her PhD. And I always say, if you're a PhD student, you are steering your own ship. You're in charge. It's your PhD. Okay, you can change your supervision panel, you can do all sorts of things. So if you don't have that drive in the first place, it makes the job very difficult. But Khushi had that from the start, and I thought that that was one of her very big strengths in the way that she approached her work.
Okay, and like I said, the communication strategy we used was just regular meetings, yarning meetings. It wasn't always about the topic, always about the PhD. She knew me as a person. She saw me as a flawed human that I am, and that made me feel very comfortable around her. We also had these high frequency, low stakes communication. So we kind of moved away from I have to present my perfect work to her, to I can meet you and provide you with these messy updates, which was really, really comfortable way of, progressing in the PhD. And another communication strategy was just openness as well. So Tracy she didn't gatekeep anything from me. She would show me examples of everything that she could. So for instance, if I were to do an ethics application, which can be quite tedious and overwhelming if you haven't done one already, she showed me examples of how exactly you tackle those questions and how exactly can you do those ethics application. Looking at data analysis, again, it can be very overwhelming looking at all the data and trying to figure out what do you do with it now. So she showed me examples of you can create tables like this and you can make figures like this. So she didn't gatekeep anything from me. She showed me examples of everything, which helped me quite a lot as well. Did you want to add anything to the communication strategy?
Only that when a PhD student addresses an Indigenous topic, there's a whole other section to the ethics application that needs to be completed correctly. And it's all about risk management. So that's an important thing for people to realize if they're doing an Indigenous topic. The ethics application isn't necessarily an easy thing, especially if it's the first and only time you've had a go at it. But that there are guidelines and processes and the right kind of positioning or perspective to have when you're completing that kind of format and that particular section. So yeah, that was definitely something that's unique to an Indigenous topic.
So just speaking a little bit more about the PhD itself, considering the topic, which was inclusion of Indigenous perspectives, it was really important for me to choose the correct methodology that helped me answer the questions that weren't quite straightforward questions. So I chose critical race theory and decolonizing race theory. And the challenge was, how do I interpret the data using these two theories? Because like I said before, I came with my own biases, I came with my own cultural lens, and I was afraid as well. I had that fear that I may misinterpret some things. And that's where Tracy's guidance on Indigenous perspectives ensured that my research wasn't perpetuating the colonial narrative that I was so trying to highlight. Some of the key findings of the PhD. So I'm moving away from our communication to the PhD itself now. Tracy, just feel free to.
I just wanted to, can I
Yeah.
just interject just one
Yes.
just one section. So with the actual methodology that Khushi decided to use with her PhD, when a PhD student decides on their theoretical framework and the method, the approach they're going to take, you don't just take, most of the time, you don't just take one and it fits perfectly. A lot of the time you take a bit of this and a bit of that and you explain why your particular topic has been approached in a certain way, why that fits with your research questions and the information, the missing knowledge that you need to find. So Khushi shaped her approach to the research out of those two methods. And she also was enabled in that approach because Indigenous academics in Australia have used those approaches and have communicated that through publications, so journal articles, etc. So Khushi was able to access that, knowing that she was going to use a methodology that Indigenous academics, from their perspective, were advocating for. Okay, so that helped. And I want to also say that Khushi presented some of her early findings, some of her early work at a AARE conference, so Australian Association for Research and Education. And that's one of the top conferences that happen in Australia. That's one of the top associations to be a part of if you're conducting research in education. And the people that Khushi had modelled some of her work from were there at the conference, okay? And so she kind of was able to go to their sessions, and I can't remember if they attended yours, I can't remember, but it was because she was putting it out there and saying, here I am and this is what I'm doing, you know, and it was great, starting from the fact that because she said she was worried she was going to offend people. You know, and we get that paralysis, but it turns out to be an excuse if people use it all the time. We're all educated people, you know, you should find out how to move forward. Don't be stuck because you're scared.
And it's interesting, just on that point, one of the things, one of the findings of my research was that teachers do fear, have this fear of inclusion of Indigenous perspectives for the same reason. They feel like they're going to do something wrong. And I thought that was interesting because maybe those teachers also need some mentors for them to, you know, to tell them that that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes, but that's not an excuse or a reason why we're not including Indigenous perspectives in our classrooms. So that was interesting. So there are lots of key findings, and yeah, you can have a look at some of my work. When I turn the slide, I'll give you a QR code to have a look at it. But one of the things, or a couple of things that came out from the PhD was the fact that the teachers, the primary school teachers in the Northern Territory, said that Indigenous perspectives were only for Indigenous schools. So schools that had higher proportion of Indigenous students, teachers said that we only incorporate Indigenous perspectives in those schools, and schools that have a lower proportion of Indigenous students, they didn't have to worry about it. You can read a little bit more on that in my thesis. And there was a perception of deficit that came across through the analysis of data using CRT and DRT towards Indigenous families and cultures. So it was more like it's their fault that they're not achieving academically. Like I said, you can read the thesis or some of the key findings using that QR code.
Okay, so Khushi did such a fantastic job that as she was still finishing her PhD, I got a fellowship awarded, so an Access First Nations fellowship. And so for 12 months, so if you know what it's like to conduct research, 12 months is a very short research cycle, and it's like sprinting the whole way. So I had this money, I knew what I wanted to do, and it was about increasing the number of Aboriginal teachers in the NT, but not only rehashing what other people have done in that space, it was about looking specifically at how we promote it better as a career of choice to Aboriginal people. So Khushi and I worked on that together too. I knew Khushi's ability in being able to conduct research and being able to meet timelines, and her initiative in getting the job done, which was fantastic. So it offered Khushi that mentorship to see how research happens within a different project. So similar to what Professor Linda Ford did for me, it enabled me to see how you run and manage a research project, including budgeting, meeting timelines, but also the really, really important aspect of media. Okay, so promoting yourself, promoting your work, and how you do that at different stages through the process. So what you can see there is one of the main outputs. So it turned out that Aboriginal students just want a teacher to tell them, you could be a teacher too. You know, it's a possibility, that could be you. And to have a conversation with it, just stop and spend the time and have a conversation. So Khushi and I created a conversation starter. And that's the front cover. Now, the front cover has a little bit of artwork that I did. I created that pattern just using AI. It was easy. But what Khushi did was she started first. So I said to Khushi, okay, look, this is what we're going to do. This is going to be the main output. This is how it should be structured. And even though Khushi didn't stop at it earlier, she had been doing some of the visual interpretation of our data. Okay, so it's really important for me to be able to tell Khushi, okay, so this is what our data tells us. This is how we found it. How do you think you'd be able to present that visually? And so Khushi did a couple of one-pager like posters that could start presenting our data in a visual way. And in fact, Khushi started out with this front cover idea of having a female teacher in the middle of the room and then students there as well. So Khushi's ability to translate the information into a visual representation was very, very helpful. And if you're interested in that, all of our resources that we finished, that we managed to achieve are online and available. And our final effort together was writing a Q1 publication. So Q1 is like quartile 1, so the top category of publications that you can produce. So that's also out there as well, about more Aboriginal teachers needed now. But if Khushi, or if Khushi's comfortable, we can maneuver back to, okay, so see this poster here on the side. So this is the poster that depicts the teachers' perspectives about what they feel about teaching, how they think it could be promoted to Aboriginal community to come and be interested in teaching, but also what motivated them to be teachers in the first place. How did they become teachers in the first place? So there was a bit of information to convey there, and Khushi created this poster, which is fantastic. The one on the other side was created by Northern Institute support staff, who also help promote and support our projects in Northern Institute. And so that one was created when we wanted to collect data from Aboriginal senior secondary students. You know, we want to know what the teenagers think about becoming a teacher as well. So it wasn't just Aboriginal teachers who are in classrooms that we spoke to, we also spoke to students. And there's another, can we go back to the earlier slide that had the other poster on it? Are we stuck? It's there. Okay, so that's another one that Khushi created. And that talks about what the student perception survey showed. Okay, so yes, there are some students who would love to be teachers, but the majority of them said no. And they said no for certain reasons. And some of the reasons were because they already had another career in mind, which is fantastic. But some of the reasons were quite sad, really. One, because they felt, you know, people hadn't spoken to them or even talked to them about the possibilities in the first place. But the other one that really sort of stood out to me was that they still didn't feel like they belonged in school. And funnily enough, teachers look miserable. Why would I want to be a teacher? You know, so in our project or in my fellowship together, and Khushi helped get that done, I had to flip that on the head and think, okay, well, how can I use those words and those understandings and those perspectives to actually turn it into an encouraging thing? How to encourage. And it turned out that students actually would like to be teachers because they'd love to be the teacher that they never had. And that message came through with the actual teachers in classrooms as well. So that was an interesting thing. And so Khushi really had to focus and work hard when she was in that final phase of her PhD, because she also had this other project happening alongside that she was able to participate in and understand and be, I suppose, mentored into some of the research processes as well. So really, you know, her accomplishment is amazing.
Really at the end. So this is a question Tracy also always asks me. So what? You know, you've done all of this research. We've spoken about our cross-cultural communication. So what? So some of the implications that I thought for HDR supervision is to focus on that cultural responsiveness and relationality, and also moving beyond just hierarchy to partnerships is really, really important to build that relationship. And creating a third space of that shared knowledge really helps with the communication as well, because you can then talk, you know, as you know, you have that mutual knowledge that you can build on, and you're not talking from different perspectives. So despite some cultural differences, you still have that common knowledge, that common bond that helps you create that professional relationship. Do you have anything to add at the end? If not, then
Only to say that the communication that happens between a supervisor and a PhD candidate is very important. Okay, because Khushi kind of touched on it, but your PhD journey can be quite stressful. And so absolutely, because you're the only one who seems to think that that topic is so important, you know, like you're driving it. So your supervisory panel needs to be supportive of you and make you feel like you can succeed in the task that you've set out to do. So that was the main goal, wasn't it? That we work together as a team. We're in it together as a team, and we're supporting Khushi to achieve the PhD thesis final submission.
And like I said, it's not just the completion, it's the mentorship afterwards as well. It is quite tricky. You finish your PhD and you think, now what? What have I achieved? What have I done? What change have I made in, you know, anyone's life? But yes, Tracy has then taken me under her wing, which is really, really important. Seeing what do I do after I have this PhD? How can I use it? How can I promote myself? Which can be really hard, promoting yourself like we're doing right now. It just goes against the instinct, isn't it? But this is something that we do have to do as researchers and academics.
So Khushi started out her journey being a teacher, and then decided she would take time off to do the PhD. And then once the PhD was almost finished, Khushi applied for a lecturer role here at CDU in education. And I would have to agree with Khushi's move in saying that if you want to change a system, you can't necessarily change it in a little, like a microcosm. You have to be able to see a bigger picture and understand what steps you have to take to be able to change something and move forward. So for Khushi to then continue promoting her research, perhaps doing some postdoc research about her PhD and furthering that, and also being involved in other research that might change the education system for the better, academia is the place to do that, okay? You get to conduct research, you get to promote your ideas, you get to collaborate with education departments so that people can trial or test your findings and your recommendations. It's where you can not just talk about something, but you can do something about it and make an impact.
That's us, I think. Thank you for that, Tracy.
What's the last slide? Okay, so those are to our professional profiles. If you want to know anything more about Khushi's work, if you want to look at what her publications are, you want to look at her thesis document, you can look at the blurb as well about her history and who she is, access that professional profile. I wanted to say thank you to Khushi. And today I would like to celebrate Khushi's work. I think it's an important milestone to finish your PhD, and then to promote it and to tell people about the findings and recommendations is a necessary step. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Questions?
Did you have an expert reference group for your research other than your supervisors, and how was that helpful?
So like I said, I did have an Indigenous organization. I had a letter of support from them because I had taught a really long time in Catherine. I did forget the name, Kalanu organization. I got in touch with them and I explained my project and asked if they were happy to support. And other than that, I had another Indigenous person in my as a research associate supervisor, sorry, so that was helpful.
Can I add to that? So when we did the fellowship as well, we worked with the Northern Institute HEP advisory group. So there was already an advisory group of education experts in place, which Linda's also a part of, that are experienced researchers in education. So Khushi had access to them if she needed. But in her ethics application, she highlighted the way that she was going to address any risk to Indigenous participants or Indigenous people within her project. And it wasn't specifically interviewing Indigenous people. Khushi's research was studying how majority non-Indigenous people address the teaching of Indigenous histories and cultures within their classroom. So it's an Indigenous topic, yes, but her participants were not solely Indigenous. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone in the room got a question? No. Oh, yeah.
I just do have one question. So thank you for this presentation. I'm looking forward to reading more. So this is part of your opportunity to share your research and knowledge with everybody. What other plans have you got? How do you plan to do that, share that research?
So I have submitted a Q1 journal article to AARE as well. I'm just waiting to hear from them, and I know unless I hear from them, I cannot send the publication to other publishers. So that's one platform. Again, I'm waiting on that because I want to publish an article in the conversation as well. So thinking about that, I'm also planning to go to the ATL conference on the Gold Coast. So I'm going to present my findings in that conference in July. I've submitted my abstract. So I'm very early stages yet. I'm just waiting for some things to finalize or some publishers to say, yes, we're happy to publish. And I continue to plan to do that. So attend conferences and write more journal articles. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Might be it.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Tracy and Khushi again for taking the time to speak to us today. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to remind people that Northern Institute has lots of events coming up. and to please have a look on our social media platforms to find out what's happening next. And we have recorded this, and once it's edited, it will go up on our YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. That's everything. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us today.